What if one of the most important events in American history wasn't won on the battlefield, but around a negotiating table? And what if the story we've been told about the founding of New York is only part of the truth? Today we are joined by best-selling historian and acclaimed author Russell Shorto, whose latest book, Taking Manhattan: The Extraordinary Events That Created New York and Shaped America, takes us back to 1664 and reveals the extraordinary events, remarkable people, and bold decisions that transformed New Amsterdam into New York and helped shape the ideas of religious freedom, diversity, commerce, and democracy that continue to influence America today. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, best-selling author Russell Shorto. Well, I am excited. So we're kind of going off the path a little bit today. Everybody knows I'm a big history buff, and I guarantee you what we're going to be talking about today is going to have some interest with pretty much everybody, or if not interest, it's going to make an impact on kind of the history of America. So we have the amazing Russell Shorto here. He is the author of two amazing books. I mean, he's written tons of things, and this guy is A-plus author. Taking Manhattan and the Island of the Center of the World is what we're going to be touching on today. And Russell, thank you so much for joining us. It's such an honor, and congratulations on the two books. They are just amazing. And you've spent more than 2 decades, 2 decades uncovering one of the most overlooked and perhaps the most important chapter in American history. And I think the audience today is going to really discover that the story they learned in school isn't the whole truth. And I think you being here today is the reason why American history is fun. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Tony, for having me, and thanks for your canned applause there.
What canned applause? I have an audience.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Your studio audience.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah. So you're right. I've been doing it for, it started in the year 2000. So it's actually been 26 years that I've been exploring New York's Dutch beginnings. Before there was New York, there was a Dutch colony of New Netherland, which extended over much of the Northeast, all or parts of New York, New Jersey, some of Connecticut, some of Pennsylvania, Delaware. And the capital was New Amsterdam at the tip of Manhattan Island, and it existed for 40 years. Wow. And a lot of American history, in surprising ways, traces back to that settlement.
I knew about it just because I'm a history buff, but many people, I guarantee you, if we stop 10 Americans on the street and ask, how America really began, I doubt they would get that right. They would go back to the Mayflower, and a few other topics. But what do you think they would get wrong, and what is the first myth you think you would like to erase?
Well, when I first got into this, I was living in New York City at the time, and I was living in the East Village, around the corner from the Church of St. Mark's in the Bowery, and Peter Stuyvesant was the director of the colony, and his tomb is there, and I would take my little daughter there to run around and play. It was the nearest open space. And I was intrigued because I knew Peter Stuyvesant, I knew New Amsterdam, but I didn't know any details at all. And I talked to some historians, and eventually somebody pointed me to Charles Gehring, who started in 1974 translating and publishing the 12,000 pages of material that are the archives of this colony. And once I started having conversations with him, it just changed my whole orientation. So you talked about people going back to the Puritans and the Pilgrims, and that's like the beginnings of America. There's another way to look at it. You could just as easily tell the story of American beginnings from Lower Manhattan and from this colony, and neither of those is wrong to focus on, but they tell very different stories. If you're focused on New England and that English settlement, it's very English, it's very Christian. It's this is our promised land, and we have a God-given right to it. If you focus on the Dutch colony and on Lower Manhattan, well, it was a very mixed place. Famously, there were 18 languages being spoken
Wow.
at a time when there were only about 500 people living there. So, as I like to say, New York was New York even before it was New York.
Right.
And they pioneered capitalism. So, if you put those two things together, capitalism and pluralism, that's America. I mean, you could say that's the real DNA of America. And I think in fact both of those are.
One thing I find fascinating, we talk a lot about once we got established here with, the new Amsterdam and even America itself, 13 colonies. But before anyone ever stepped in New Amsterdam, what was happening in Europe that created this condition for this extraordinary experiment, that we are now living in today?
I think Americans, if you're right now on the 250th anniversary of the Revolution, we're somewhat mindful of the European Enlightenment of the 1700s. Before that, the century before that, was the Dutch Enlightenment. And that Dutch Enlightenment of the 1600s is what spawned the wider European Enlightenment. And it was all focused on when people began to focus on the individual, on human reason. Descartes famously wanted to orient knowledge on, as he said, the mind and its good sense.
Right.
So we don't necessarily look to the Bible or kings or for, that's our ultimate truth. We look at reason. And that's the beginning, of course, of science. It's the beginning of thoughts about democracy, because if we all have a similar capacity to reason, then we're all in some way equal. And from that came the idea that, well, the only legitimate form of government is one in which everybody has an equal say. So all of those things are starting to ferment in Europe in the 1600s. At the same time, the 1600s in Europe is the great era of religious warfare. At the beginning, you have the Protestant Reformation, this split away from Catholicism, and you have all these different splinter groups and all kinds of turmoil. The Dutch provinces, what's now the Netherlands, became unusual because at the time in Europe, intolerance was official policy in most places. In Spain, in England, in France, the idea was it's a dangerous world. We all have to be on the same page. Religion is a very divisive thing, so we want to have a state religion. We want to push out other religions. Right. In the Dutch provinces, they did this. They had a real watershed moment where they had this policy of religious toleration enshrined into their what was in effect their constitution, in which they said all are entitled to their religious beliefs, and nobody should be persecuted because of them. So that became something special, and then that got translated when they established a colony in North America. That came along.
How did they think so? The Dutch, how did they think so differently from the rest of Europe? Because, like you said, that was very progressive, where many of them were under so much rule. Why was that? Why was they so different?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, you say progressive, and I know what you mean, but we should keep in mind that this is restrictive. It wasn't like celebrating diversity or anything like that.
Right.
I mean,
yes.
they had a slave trade
of that era.
How tolerant can you be if you have a slave trade? So there were, this is, but it is still, I think, nevertheless, an important moment, an important milestone where they said we're not going to punish or prosecute you if you have a different faith. Why they came up with that, I think it has partly to do with geography. The Netherlands is the Low Countries. Much of it is below sea level. There aren't natural barriers like mountains, so people could flee there. If people in these religious wars could flee there from other parts of Europe, so you begin to get different kinds of people, different languages and ethnicities and religions settling there. they were also a seafaring people. And that means they're natural traders and they are learning other languages. They're not as
Right.
fearful of the other. So, you could say for practical reasons, they came up with this religious toleration policy because it's good for business.
Yeah, when you look back in history, when New Amsterdam was founded, I'm curious to hear what you think. Do you think they realized that they were creating something like historically unique, or do you feel that it was just kind of gradually, or the importance only became clear in hindsight?
No, I don't. I don't think they thought that. I think they were uh, establishing an outpost. European countries. This is the moment of European
Right.
colonization in West Africa and Asia, and the Dutch had outposts in India. They were, and England was starting to build its empire. So. This was a base for at this moment they were actually in the midst of a war of independence. They were trying to break away from the Spanish Empire, which was a Catholic empire, and they were a Protestant nation largely. Um, and so one thing they were trying to do was break away from Spain and use this as a base to fight their war against Spain in the Caribbean.
Right.
But they were also trying to make money. They were looking for opportunity, as were these European nations when they went to Asia and to India for silks and spices and things like that. And in North America, it was principally furs, beaver pelts, and other furs,
Right. Right.
and also then tobacco. Tobacco was an American crop, and they first tried growing tobacco on Manhattan, and it wasn't very good quality. And they realized further south, you had better product. But that's all of that was part of what they were doing, and they happened to have this mix of people, so that all kind of came along for the ride. And at this same period, they had pioneered the notion of corporations, of shares of stock, of a stock exchange.
Wow.
So you throw that into the mix, and you have this new kind of economic engine to power something like this.
How did the other colonies around that were not Dutch kind of owned or Dutch populated by, how was it taken with these other colonies that, probably had different views?
Yeah, well, you mainly had the English. The English essentially at the same time established these New England
Yeah.
colonies, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, the Plymouth Colony, and others. And then there were settlements to the south of New Netherland
Hmm.
in Maryland and Virginia. And it's a complicated story. There's not one clear answer. In England, to the extent that they were thinking about these colonies at all, the king decided, well, all of America is really English. We just haven't had a chance to go and kick the Dutch out. The Dutch and the English throughout this whole period are bitter rivals, and they fought several trade wars against one another. So there was that hanging over the Dutch colony. But within that, the Dutch were doing business with these English colonies. They were trading with them. People were moving back and forth from one to the other, and there were English settlers who settled within New Netherland in the Dutch colony itself.
Yeah, I was curious to see how the English was, but I have to say though, the Dutch, even though they were, I guess, rivals, it stuck. I mean, a lot of the policies and a lot of the culture stuck even after the English, tried
Well,
to.
that's really the subject of my most recent book, which is right behind me, Taking Manhattan.
Yeah.
That focuses on this moment of the when the English finally send their ships into the harbor, and they're saying, they're going to do battle with the Dutch and take over this colony. And in fact, what I discovered is it's not really a military takeover. It was more of a merger, because the people
Oh,
on the ground, I mean, they were ready to fight and they had their cannons pointed at each other, but they had this 2-week period of negotiation in which they were feeling each other out, and they already knew a lot about one another, and they came to understand that the best thing, not necessarily for the people in the home countries, but for the people here on the ground, the best thing was to effect a kind of merger. So the English wanted this colony, they wanted this real estate, but they didn't just want the real estate. They didn't only want this island of Manhattan.
Right.
They had learned that the Dutch had this, what we would call capitalism going, and they'd learned that they were making tolerance and pluralism work for them. And they didn't know how to do that. So they wanted everyone to stay. They wanted to keep them happy. The Dutch, from their perspective, realized that they had long since realized that the home country was not supporting them. They were getting a lot of money from other parts of the world, other colonies, and this. So they had sort of cut them loose. So they decide to do this merger, and because of that, Dutchness, you might say, these elements that I'm talking about remain, because that was the terms of the agreement was you'll keep your homes, you'll keep your businesses, you'll keep your trade networks and all that. And that then becomes fused into New York as an English settlement.
Thank God it was a merger than just a takeover. I think and tried to wipe away the culture of the Dutch. I think that would.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, you play those what if games. What would have happened if they had fought? What would have happened if the Dutch had won? I mean, you and I might be speaking Dutch right now.
Right. Well, okay, and I'm always apologizing, especially for anybody's name in case I mispronounce it, but names in Dutch are so difficult. So you write very extensively about Adrian van der Donk. Is that right?
Yeah.
But do you believe, because most people probably have never heard of this gentleman, do you believe that he should be remembered as some of America's other founding fathers? And
I think that's, in my earlier book, The Island at the Center of the World, that's really a book about the whole story of the Dutch colony. And he's a remarkable figure who is not much remembered, who saw the potential of this colony and did everything in his power to try to convince the Dutch government to really give it the support it needed. He wrote a book which became kind of bestseller in Europe. It was the first time many people in Europe heard of a place called Manhattan, and he talked up there's the book, and he promoted America, basically. He talked about how the trees are taller there, the animals are bigger and more ferocious, the crops grow taller, the fruit is sweeter, and he got hundreds of people to come to the colony, and he wanted the government to really support this colony. And so it was thanks to him that New York City was finally chartered, got its municipal charter as a Dutch city in 1653, and that's from that, you could say that's really the beginning of New York.
And then again, I'm going to try Peter
Stuyvesant.
There we go. Can you tell us more about him? Because again, he's
Peter Stuyvesant. And if you're a New Yorker, you know how to say that name because he's everywhere, all over New York. There's Peter Stuyvesant High School. There's streets and. Stuyvesant was the last director of the colony, the Dutch colony. He's the one that locked horns with Richard Nicolls, the Englishman who wanted to take over. He also locked horns earlier with Adrian van der Donk over, what this colony could become. He's a complicated figure. He runs the colony for its last 17 years. He starts out being very dogmatic. He takes over in a time of turmoil and he's thinking that he has to lay down the law, and he refers to the people as his subjects. But he very quickly comes to see that this population that he had come into are very tough traders who, they go off on ships to the Caribbean and to South America and to West Africa, and they're not going to be pushed around. So he comes to realize what's going to make this place work is if he can work together with them to make it a success. So then he decides that he's got to be the go-between between the colonists and the home country. So he really and then he negotiates with the English over this merger. So in many ways, he too is a figure who created not just New York, but it laid the foundation for a lot of what we call America. Now, there's pros and cons with all of these people. Stuyvesant also begins the slave trade in New Amsterdam, and then that really ramps up in New York. So there's a plus and minus there.
Now, this at the beginning, I told people this is where what is important with what we're going through now, and also how it really shaped America. Peter also, I think you said that he kind of or often resisted religious freedom. And this is where it jumps into the Flushing Remonstrance. Most people do not know what this is. We know the Constitution talked about religious freedoms, but this, I believe, is one of the first kind of takes on the real religious freedoms of how our country kind of even installed it into the Constitution. Can you talk about what the Flushing Remonstrance is and how important this was for, especially of that time?
Yeah, so the background to it is, as I alluded to earlier, when the Dutch nation is coming into being, they have this policy of religious toleration. So that's a real watershed, and it's really unusual in Europe. So that then, once you have this colony in North America, that's part of the picture, the idea that you'll tolerate different religions. Peter Stuyvesant, as the director of the colony, was, I guess you'd say, pretty intolerant. He didn't love this religious toleration policy, and maybe largely for selfish reasons. It made life more difficult. That's when you have different people from different backgrounds and arguing about religion and things, it makes his life harder. And he's trying to, they have this settlement in the middle of the wilderness, and so he didn't love this principle. So what happened in this case is, in the year 1657, in this one English settlement within the Dutch colony, this village of Vlissingen, which became Flushing, which is now the Flushing Queens, part of it's on Long Island. It was a largely English settlement within the Dutch colony, and it's into this settlement came a group of English Quakers. Stuyvesant didn't feel good about Quakers because he thought, they quake, they disrupt the peace. So he tried to boot them out. Whereupon a group of leaders of the town of Flushing, English leaders who live within this Dutch colony, write him a letter. This is the Flushing Remonstrance. And basically the letter reminds him that under his own system, under the Dutch system, he has to tolerate them. And I can quote the sort of business section of it. They said, "The law of love, peace, and liberty in the states," meaning in the Dutch states, the United Provinces. "The law of love, peace, and liberty in the states, extending to Jews, Turks, and Egyptians, as they are considered sons of Adam, which is the glory of the outward state of Holland. So love, peace, and liberty extending to all in Jesus Christ condemns hatred, war, and bondage." So what they're saying is, your own province of Holland, your own country, has this policy that extends even to Egyptians and Turks and Jews, and that's what God wants, and that's what you should allow here. So that's considered by many to be sort of the first statement on American shores of there being this innate universal principle of religious freedom.
Now, I'm going to throw in a personal reason here, or personal reason I'm asking this question. I my seventh great grandfather was Richard Stockton, who signed this Declaration of Independence. But his also father, and I think father was Richard Stockton, who came to Flushing's. Did Richard Stockton have something to do or contribute to this remonstrance?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. You can Google that in about 2 minutes, I'm sure.
It says yes. It said that he...
Is he a signatory?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe so.
I'm going to look down the list right now. Richard Stockton, you're absolutely right. He's one of the signers of the Flushing Remonstrance.
Yeah, he was Colonel of the Horse or something like that for England, and so or whatever title he had. But yeah, he was my like eighth or ninth great grandfather. So that's one reason I had a very kind of a interest in this, because it's always kind of cool to be a part of history. Sure. And plus I didn't know about this before, and then it made sense. It's like Native Americans, a lot of stuff that they created, ended up influencing our Constitution and Declaration of Independence, all that stuff. So it was just really cool. And I found it was extraordinary. Extraordinary for the time, like you said, to be open to all these different religions from around the world and welcoming. And even though they didn't share the same beliefs, it's just fascinating to me that they were so open at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's within constraints, and you have, this story about with the Flushing Remonstrance concerns Quakers, and so Stuyvesant kind of backs down, but then he starts to send soldiers in to break up meetings again later, and then they try again. So it's basically what you see is a civil rights struggle, and you see that throughout history. You see it in our time. The law says X, but the leaders don't follow it. So what do? You go to court, and if you have good lawyers and you're lucky, the leaders are forced to follow the law. And that the Stuyvesant did the same thing, a very similar thing with Jews, trying to bar Jews from settling. And they went over his head. They appealed to the home country, and the leaders then wrote to Stuyvesant and said, you know what, they're right. You have to let them stay. But still, he didn't want them to stay, so he made life difficult for them. So then they had to fight it out, like at the court level on specific things that he was.
That's amazing.
So I mean, this stuff we like to think, oh, you do, somebody makes some grand pronouncement, everybody says, oh, great, now we live by that. It's never as simple as that.
I was going to say it's never that easy.
Yeah.
Well, if Adrian van der Donk, I love just saying that name. If you, because this is one of your favorite, one of my favorite themes in the book is history is not inevitable. But if Adrian had lived longer, do you think New Netherlands or Netherlands would perhaps even the future of the United States might have developed differently?
These what if questions are so.
Okay.
Yeah, of course it would have developed differently. The butterfly theory, if a butterfly flaps its wings, then, the weather on the other side of the earth changes. So, he died prematurely, and had he kept pushing, who knows, the Dutch colony he might have gotten the Dutch government to strengthen the colony. They might have stood up to it instead of creating a merger with the English. And maybe today, part of what became the United States would have remained, that would have maybe broken away and been a separate nation in which Dutch was the, maybe New York would have stayed New Netherland, and it would have been Dutch language today. Who knows? I mean, you play these things out. It almost becomes science fiction then.
That's with America, it was so fragile. Everything, one little thing could have changed the direction of our future. So,
what? On that note, I always think, because I wrote a book called Revolution Song about the American Revolution, and it focused on George Washington as well as others. Mm-hmm. And I have long believed that Washington, when he was a young man, desperately wanted a commission in the British Army. And because he was a colonial, they wouldn't give it to him. All he could be, it was like a Virginia militia. And I believe that had they given it to him, he would never have joined
Probably not.
the revolution. I think he would have been a staunch, British officer. And who know how would history have changed then?
Thank you, UK, for not doing that.
Yeah.
I do want to touch on the 12,000 pages of original Dutch records. This sounds like some archives that just kind of got forgotten, and then you discovered these pages. Was it like a buried treasure to you when you finally had access to this?
Well, I didn't discover them myself.
Well, I know you
I
didn't.
discovered,
Yeah.
I discovered, or I was pointed to Charles Gehring, who
Right.
was busy translating them and had been translating them for decades. And so I devoted part of the book, The Island at the Center of the World, to telling the story of these records, how they were, as you say, forgotten once the English took over. They were just
Right.
pushed to the side. And then there were a couple of different efforts in history to translate them, make them part of history. And then finally, in the 1970s, Charlie Gehring comes along, and he really devoted his whole career. He retired last year at the age of 85. He devoted his whole career to this, and the organization is called the New Netherland Institute. Anybody who's interested, go to newnetherlandinstitute.org. The website, all these translations are up on the website. Your ancestor, you can find your ancestor there,
Right.
because he was an inhabitant of New Netherland. And they're regular. The New Netherland Institute has regular talks and other kinds of programs.
As somebody that's, like you said, 20 some years, when you finally started doing, reading these 12,000 pages and just doing the research, what really changed your view or your outlook on this history that many people don't even know? How had it changed you personally? What did it give you a new hope of hoping to, give people an understanding of our history? What was your finality when it comes to doing all this research after 25 years? What changed in you?
Yeah, it changed me in so many ways. I mean, just practically, it's become a center of my work life.
Right.
I spend a lot of time with it. And as a writer, I write nonfiction narrative history, narrative meaning storytelling.
Right.
I want to tell a story. I want someone to start page one and just be pulled the whole way through. And I want to tell. I'm really interested in something that's very familiar that you thought you knew, but if you kind of change the angle a little bit, it's different. You're seeing it as if for the first time, and that for me, that's what this did for American beginnings. I thought I had a sense of the Puritans and the Pilgrims and New England and the Jamestown colony. And it's weird how this huge chunk of territory in the middle, early American history textbooks just all but ignored. And it's not like it's some forgotten field somewhere. I mean, it's Manhattan. It's maybe the most consequential island ever.
It is, yeah.
So when I realized that was the magnitude of this, that was very exciting, and so that changed me. And then I try to, tell other people about it and get them excited about it, and see that this is really it's in our DNA. It's part of who we are.
Yeah. As someone that's has had family members, in this country since the 1600s, and some in my mom's side, that's my mom's side's mom, and then on the dad's side, they came over in the late 1800s. They were Bohemian or Czech. So I've had a big array of people in this country for a long time, but I also see the injustice that has gone on to many of our brothers and sisters, from indigenous to African American. And you've spent years bringing these forgotten voices back to life, that's what I love about authors, and that people can dive into. But from indigenous leaders and religious refugees to enslaved Africans, are you close to the final page of taking Manhattan, the title of your book? Who do you hope readers remember the most? Is there one, and whose story do you think history has treated most unfairly?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because we're here talking about English and the Dutch, but there were so many other people involved. And in both books, and especially in Taking Manhattan, I really try to focus on an array of them and tell their stories. And through that, as I said before, the Dutch are tolerant, but how tolerant are you if you're dispossessing native people of their land and kicking them out of it? So they're absolutely remarkable native indigenous people who factor in this history. And at the same time, starting just a year after the founding of New Amsterdam, that's when the first enslaved Africans arrived, and they are very much a part of the story. And the story of slavery in this time is evolving. They're making it up. So it's not what you think when you think of American slavery. So just to pick one, since you asked me to pick one, I focus on a woman named Dorothea Angola, and I kind of follow her through her life. We don't know if she was born in Africa or born in an African community in the Caribbean, but she was probably a part of a group early in the life of this Dutch colony. There was a Dutch ship in the Caribbean, or actually off the coast of Venezuela, got into a mix-up with, as I said, they were fighting the Spanish and the Portuguese with a Portuguese ship. That Portuguese ship had Africans on it. They took a number of them on board, and they had heard about the founding of this colony in this island of Manhattan, so they took them there and dropped them off. That's how she probably got there. Right. She was probably a teenager at the time. Her name was Dorothea, which was probably her given name, because she probably ultimately was from a part of Africa that had generations before been colonized by the Portuguese. And and they gave them Catholic saint names. She then she spends her whole life thereafter in the Dutch colony. She has two husbands at different times. The first dies, she remarries. Her husband petitions for freedom, which is one thing that you could do in the colony. She gets the freedom, and then ultimately, and with freedom comes land. She owned 8 acres of land, and when I was working on the book, I was plotting on the grid of Manhattan where was her land, and I'm looking at the present-day map, and it's Mercer Street and Thompson and McDougal, and I realized it's Greenwich Village. She owned Greenwich Village.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And she had children and grandchildren, and so you picture her, and this is a couple of miles north of the city of New Amsterdam, and then the city of New York once it becomes English. And you just picture her as this older black woman with her family all around her, living in this this acreage, this farm of hers, surrounded. And this came to be called the land of the blacks, because other freed blacks were given land in the area. And she has other neighbors who are black freed people. That in itself, I mean, she became something. Thinking of this beginnings,
that's amazing.
She became something, and that's, you could tell the American story from her perspective just as well as from these other perspectives.
Okay, I think that's a movie script that you need to write, because I think that would be an amazing movie. Well, just to close out, I know I could talk to you all day about this stuff, and I know people probably have questions. Hopefully they can reach out to you. You can just you can look underneath and says Russell Shorto, and that's SHORTO.com. And you can ask questions or hopefully go see him speak somewhere. But Russell, let's say that in 200 years from now, when historians are now looking back at your work, and I'm sure they will. What do you think they'll say about the greatest lesson that they learned from your book and also from New Amsterdam? And then also, in 200 years, no telling what's going to happen, but what warning or what hope do you feel that they're going to offer their current civilization?
I can't say what anybody else is going to take from my work, but one thing that really strikes me now, especially in this crazy moment we're living through in history, is the story that I tell in the latest book, Taking Manhattan, is really where you have these two enemies who are about to attack one another, and they stop, and they both say, "I wonder if there's a way that we can talk about this, and it's not a zero-sum game. Maybe we can both benefit in some way." And that's what they what they came up with was New York City. That's the root of New York. And because they did it in that way, merging these English and Dutch elements, that allowed New York to become this center of finance, the center of so much of American immigration. And so I think there's a great lesson in that for all of us in trying to look at the other person and come to accommodation and see what we can jointly get out of this.
I love that. I think right, left, red, blue, whatever Muslim, Christian, Jewish, whatever. I think this is a great lesson. And this is why they say learn your history so you don't repeat itself. And I think that's a great way to end on, because I think we're forgetting our history and we're repeating ourselves. So maybe we can, before we shoot across the bay or or strike another human being or whatever, we can realize that maybe we have some common ground, which we do, that we can, merge. Go ahead. Yeah.
Can I say one more thing?
Please.
I should give a quick promotion for, I have an exhibition that I curated, an art exhibition at the New York Historical on the Upper West Side of New York, which runs through August. That's called Old Masters, New Amsterdam. It brings 60 Dutch Old Master paintings by Rembrandt and his contemporaries, and we're using them to get an idea of what this place, what New Amsterdam might have looked and felt like. So if you get a chance, if you're in New York this summer, go see the show, Old Masters, New Amsterdam.
And I'm going to put that up there right now. So if people want to go to check it out, I wish I'm going to have to try to make it out. So yeah, Old Masters, New Amsterdam, May 1st through August 30th, the New York Historical. I love it. I may have to make a trip now. I'm going to have to spend some money, come out and see the expedition. So thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks a lot, Tony. This was fun.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know people can go to your website. Is there are you going to do any speaking or book signing?
Well, this summer I'm taking off because I'm working on a book. But yeah, I would say go. There's lots of videos I've got online. We do a regular series at the New York Historical called Live from New Amsterdam. You can look up. And we have interviews kind of like this with people who are doing interesting work in that period of Dutch and American history.
Well, happy 4th, and hopefully your work is going to help change some people's minds and views and make a difference in creating a little more unity in our country. But please, everybody, support Russell and his books, Taking Manhattan, and then Inside the Center of the World. I cannot wait to see what the next book is. Do you have a title yet?
The title is The Dark and the Light.
Oh, I can't. What, may I ask what it's about, or do you want to?
It's about Rembrandt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's in the same time period, but a European story. It's a kind of a biography, but it's life and art and drama and tragedy, and
A man of the world right there. Well, thank you, Russell, for being here. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today on Truth Be Told on Club Paranormal Network. Please subscribe, share this show. It's a history that needs to be heard, and also taking that maybe it can make a difference in our current situation. But until next time, I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told on the Club Paranormal Network. Take care of yourself and each other. Bye.